Chosen one, God may not be asking you for another prayer about whether it is time to move. He may be asking what you are going to do with the clarity you already have. And before you assume move means packing a suitcase, listen carefully. Some people are being called out of a place. Some are being called out of an identity. Some are being called out of a routine that once protected them but now keeps them small. And some are being called out of something even harder to leave. The habit of asking for another confirmation every time the next step becomes uncomfortable. There comes a moment when waiting is faith. And there comes a moment when waiting becomes fear, wearing spiritual language. The frightening part is that the two can feel almost identical from the inside. You can pray and still postpone. You can ask for wisdom and still hide behind uncertainty. You can say you are waiting for peace, while part of you already knows the next faithful step. That does not mean every restless feeling is a command from God. Not every discomfort means leave. Wisdom still matters, facts still matter, responsibility still matters. But some discomfort keeps returning after the emotion fades. It points toward a question you have been avoiding. What if the issue is not silence? What if you are negotiating with what you already know? Maybe your old life still works. You can still show up. You can still repeat the same routines. But something inside you no longer fits there. The conversations feel smaller. The future keeps pressing against a life that once felt large enough. Many chosen ones think a closed season must become terrible before they can leave it. They wait for betrayal. They wait for collapse. They wait for a dramatic sign. But sometimes a season ends quietly. Sometimes the evidence is that you can no longer become who you are called to be while staying loyal to who you had to be before. So do not rush to burn bridges. Do not force a dramatic exit. Do not call impulse divine instruction. But notice repetition. Notice the same decision returning. Notice the same tension after every distraction. Notice what happens when you imagine staying exactly where you are for another year. Does your spirit become calm, or does something in you become smaller? Panic changes every hour. Persistent clarity keeps returning. Panic demands immediate escape. Persistent clarity can survive sleep, a hard conversation, and an honest look at consequences. Movement does not require you to stop thinking. It requires you to stop using thinking as a hiding place. You ask the same question, but every answer leads back to the step. You ask whether you should apply. You ask whether you should speak. You ask whether you should create a boundary. Then the step appears, and suddenly you need another confirmation. That cycle is not clarity. It is delay wearing a sacred coat. If this touches something specific in you, write "move" in the comments, not as a magic word. Let it mark your willingness to look at the next step without running from it, because one question must be answered. How do you know whether the restlessness you feel is direction or simply frustration? That answer matters, because movement without discernment becomes chaos, but discernment without movement becomes another form of captivity. And you may discover that the thing you have called waiting is not waiting anymore. It is postponing. Chosen one, waiting and postponing can look almost identical from the outside. Both can be quiet. Both can involve prayer. Both can sound patient. But inside, they are driven by different things. Waiting creates readiness. Postponing creates another excuse to remain where you are. You may call it discernment. You may call it caution. You may say, God has not made the path clear enough. But if the same direction keeps returning, and fear is the only thing that changes your answer, you may not be missing clarity. You may be demanding certainty. And certainty can become a very expensive form of comfort. You want to know the whole road before the first step. You want every risk removed. But real movement rarely works that way. Faith is not blindness. It is responsible action when the next step is clear enough, even while the whole picture is still incomplete. Ask yourself 3 questions. Does this direction keep returning after the emotion fades? Does it remain after prayer, sleep, and honest reflection? Can you take one responsible step without destroying what must be protected? If the answer is yes, you may already have more clarity than you admit. Fear begins to negotiate. It asks for one more sign. It imagines every possible disaster. It reminds you of the worst thing that could happen and calls that wisdom. Then you reopen a question that was already settled enough for one small action. This is the confirmation trap. You are no longer seeking truth. You are seeking permission to avoid discomfort. That does not mean you should ignore caution. Healthy caution examines facts and produces a plan. Fear keeps you circling after the facts are clear. Healthy caution asks what must be prepared. Fear asks how long you can stay unchanged without admitting you chose to stay. Look at your own pattern. Maybe you have researched the same opportunity 10 times. Maybe you have asked 3 people the same question. Maybe you have prayed about the same boundary for months. Every time the answer points toward action, your mind creates a new requirement before movement is allowed. Many believe peace must arrive before movement, but sometimes peace appears after your nervous system learns that movement did not destroy you. Sometimes courage is not the feeling that makes you step. Sometimes the step teaches your body that courage was possible. You do not need to feel fearless before you become faithful. So here is the distinction. Divine waiting prepares you. It deepens wisdom. It produces something useful while you remain still. Postponing does the opposite. It drains energy. It multiplies questions. It makes the same decision heavier each time you revisit it. One kind of waiting builds you. The other teaches you to distrust yourself. If your season requires waiting, then wait well. Prepare, save, learn, heal, gather information, strengthen what will carry the next season. But if your season requires movement, stop asking, waiting to protect you from the cost of becoming. You are not required to know everything. You are required to be honest about what you already know. And now, the deeper question appears. Why can the familiar still feel safer, even when it is clearly costing you something? Why can a painful room feel easier to stay in than an open door feels to enter? The answer has less to do with weakness than you think. It has to do with what familiarity does to the mind. Chosen one. Familiarity has a hidden price. You rarely notice it because the payment leaves in small amounts. A little attention here, a little courage there, a little imagination when you silence what must change. That hidden cost is what I call the familiarity tax. The familiar can feel safe simply because your mind knows what to expect. You know the people, you know the routine. Even pain can become predictable. Predictable pain can feel easier than an uncertain future because the mind often prefers a known problem over an unknown possibility. That is why staying can feel peaceful for a moment. The pressure drops when you cancel the difficult conversation. Your body relaxes when you say you will deal with it next month. But relief is not always peace. Sometimes relief is only your system celebrating that nothing unfamiliar was required today. Familiar does not always mean safe. Unfamiliar does not always mean wrong. You can feel nervous while moving towards something healthy. You can feel calm while repeating something harmful. Emotion is information, but not the final judge. Wisdom asks what a pattern produces over time. Look at the environment around you, not only the room where you live. Think about the conversations you repeat. Think about people who only know the old version of you. Think about a schedule with no space for what matters. An environment is anything that repeatedly tells your mind who you are expected to remain. This is how the familiarity tax is collected. One environment can keep activating the same fear. One relationship can pull you back into an old role. One routine can remind your mind that survival comes before creation. You may be building a new life inside cues that quietly recreate the old one. Do not blame everything outside. That gives power away. The The point is not that every difficult person must be removed. The point is that repeated cues shape repeated responses. If you never examine those cues, you may keep calling the same reaction your personality. That is where awareness becomes practical. Use 3 simple actions. Notice what repeatedly changes your state. Name what it activates in you. Then reduce the unnecessary exposure or agreement that keeps feeding it. Maybe you delay one draining conversation. Maybe you move your first hour away from your phone. Maybe you stop explaining your plan to people committed to misunderstanding it. Small changes reveal things. When a cue is reduced, you get to see what remains. If the fear becomes quieter, the environment carried more influence than you realized. If it remains, the work is deeper. Either way, you gain information. But changing the environment is not enough. If the old agreement travels with you, the pattern travels too. You can change cities and carry the same fear. You can change jobs and carry the same need for approval. You can leave one relationship and carry the same pattern into another. Movement begins before the suitcase. It begins when you stop feeding what you say you are ready to leave. It begins when your attention stops voting for the old version of you. It begins when your choices start agreeing with the future you keep praying for. That is when movement becomes real. And yet environment is only half the story. A person can know what to do and still lose that clarity by morning. The next layer is about what happens inside the receiver when the signal arrives. Chosen one. The closer you get to a real threshold, the less theoretical your life becomes. From far away, change can feel inspiring. At the doorway, something must be released. Approval, predictability, a role, a version of you that other people have grown comfortable depending on. That is why the final stretch can feel heavier than the entire road behind you. You are not only choosing what comes next, you are also deciding what no longer gets to come with you. And that is where many people turn back. Not because the future is wrong, but because the old identity still feels familiar. Maybe you have spent years being the dependable one. Maybe you have been the person who keeps everyone calm. Maybe your whole life has been built around not disappointing people. Then movement arrives, and suddenly your next step threatens the role that once made you feel needed. This is the threshold. It is the place where desire stops being enough. You can want the new season deeply and still refuse the surrender it requires. You can pray for expansion while protecting every structure that keeps your life exactly the same. That conflict creates exhaustion. Picture tomorrow morning after one honest decision. Nothing outside you may have changed yet. The same room is there. The same responsibilities are waiting. But the argument inside you is quieter. The energy you spent reopening the same question is finally available for the next action. That is what decision can restore. Not certainty, not control, direction. There is a difference between knowing everything and knowing enough to move responsibly. One gives you fantasy-level control. The other gives you a faithful next step. Take a moment and notice your body. Think about the decision you keep delaying. Do not force an answer. Just notice where tension appears. Your chest, your stomach, your jaw, your shoulders. The sensation is not a prophecy, but it may show you where fear has been living. Now notice what happens when you imagine staying exactly the same for another year. Do you feel relief or do you feel contraction? Again, do not turn a body sensation into a command. Use it as information. Then bring wisdom, facts, prayer, and consequences into the same room. There is another reason this matters. A person can receive real clarity and still lose access to it hours later. At night, the direction feels obvious. By morning, the mind is crowded again. Doubt returns. The decision gets reopened. Then another week disappears. Over the past few years, Researchers have continued exploring how different parts of the brain coordinate attention, perception, and decision-making. That matters here because spiritual sincerity does not automatically remove mental overload. A clear signal can still meet a noisy receiver. I am going to return to that later. Not to replace discernment with science, not to reduce faith to biology, but because there is a practical question hiding underneath your hesitation. Why can clarity feel strong in one moment, then almost impossible to hold in the next? Chosen one, think about how often this happens. You read something and everything becomes clear. You know the conversation you need to have. You know the work you need to begin. You know what must stop. Then an hour passes and the fog starts rebuilding itself. By evening, you are searching again. By morning, you are questioning again. You reopen what felt settled. You add more opinions. You collect more information. Soon the original clarity is buried under so much mental noise that you cannot tell whether you ever knew anything at all. Many people call this laziness. Others call it weak faith. Some assume they have lost their calling. But those explanations can become cruel because they turn every struggle with attention into a moral failure. Sometimes the deeper issue is simpler. The receiver is overloaded. Think of it this way. A message can be meaningful, but your ability to hold it, organize it, and act on it depends partly on the condition of your mind. If attention is scattered, sleep is poor, stress is high, and every decision is competing with 10 others, clarity has a harder time staying available. This does not prove that every spiritual problem is neurological. It does not mean biology explains God. It means your mental condition can influence what you notice, what you remember, and how effectively you turn insight into action. That distinction matters. I call this the receiver problem. The signal may not be missing. The receiver may be carrying too much noise, and when noise becomes normal, you stop noticing it as noise. You simply start calling yourself confused. You know that feeling. You open one task, then another. You check a message, you remember something else. You return to the original decision, and somehow it feels heavier than before. Your mind is active, but movement is low. That is not the same as having no desire. This is why more information does not always solve hesitation. Sometimes it makes it worse. Another message, another opinion, another sign, another tab. The mind keeps collecting while the decision keeps waiting. Knowledge increases, but usable clarity decreases. The answer is not to stop thinking. The answer is to reduce noise and restore conditions where thinking can become useful again. That may involve sleep, boundaries, fewer inputs, written decisions, focused work, or professional support when needed. Clarity is practical before it becomes dramatic. And this is where the earlier threshold becomes important. If you keep treating fog as proof that the direction is wrong, you can stay trapped indefinitely. But if you learn to separate the decision from the noise surrounding it, you begin to see what has actually been consistent. Maybe the calling was never absent. Maybe the plan was never completely hidden. Maybe your mind has simply been trying to process too much at once. That does not make you broken. It means the condition of the receiver deserves attention. There is one more layer. Even when people understand the problem, they often keep feeding the exact life they say they want to leave. They keep the old agreement alive. They keep the old schedule untouched. They keep giving attention to the old identity. And that creates the hardest question in this message. Why does knowing what to do still fail to produce movement? Why can insight feel powerful, yet disappear before it becomes action? The answer is where the old life keeps getting its supply. Chosen one, you can say you want a new season and still keep feeding the old one every day. That is not hypocrisy. It is a conflict of allegiance. One part of you wants the future. Another part keeps supplying the structure that makes the old life possible. You want peace, but you keep reopening the wound. You want a new direction, but your schedule gives it no time. You want a boundary, but you still explain yourself to the same people. You want freedom, but your attention keeps returning to what you already said you were ready to leave. This is why desire alone does not create movement. The old pattern survives because it is still being funded. Not always with money, often with attention, excuses, rituals, and repeated emotional loyalty. What you continue feeding continues having influence. The shift begins when you withdraw agreement. You stop arguing with the truth you already recognize. You stop giving every fear equal voting power. You stop asking an expired identity for permission to become someone new. This does not require a dramatic escape. In fact, the first move is often much smaller than the fear surrounding it. That is what I call the first move principle. You do not solve your whole life in one day. You make one concrete action that proves movement has begun. The first move should be clear. It should be responsible. If the decision is large, the first step should usually be reversible or protective. It should reduce confusion instead of multiplying it. And it should be something you can actually complete within the next few days. Send the application, make the call, build the budget, pack one box, schedule the consultation, set one boundary, protect 1 hour for the work you keep saying matters. Earlier, I asked you to hold a question. Why can a person receive clarity and then lose access to it hours later? Why can the direction feel obvious at night, then become foggy by morning? I waited to return to that, because a solution only matters after you understand the problem it is meant to address. Familiarity can imitate safety, noise can bury usable clarity, and old patterns stay alive when we keep supplying them. But one question remains: why does knowing all of this still fail to produce movement? The answer is not always in your beliefs. Sometimes insight is present, but the mind cannot hold it steadily enough to turn it into action. That is why clarity must become something more than a moment. It must become a condition you can return to. Here is the plain truth. You are not stuck because God has forgotten you. You may be stuck because the old pattern still feels safer than movement. You may also be carrying so much mental noise that the next step keeps disappearing under the weight of everything else. What do you do with that? First, you stop feeding what you say you are leaving. Second, you reduce the noise that keeps reopening settled questions. Third, you make one responsible action visible in the real world. That is how insight begins becoming movement. And who are you in this process? Not someone waiting to be rescued. Not someone who needs perfect certainty before taking a faithful step. You are someone learning to receive clarity, test it with wisdom, and act when the next responsible step becomes clear. The clarity is real, but clarity alone is not movement. There is still one practical question left. If the receiver itself is part of the problem, what can support a clearer condition, so insight has a better chance to become action? Chosen one, there is a reason I waited until now to return to the question about the receiver. You first needed to see the whole shape of the problem. Familiarity can imitate safety. Noise can bury clarity. Old patterns can keep receiving your attention long after you say you are ready to leave them. So the question is not only what you know. The question is whether your mind can hold that knowing long enough for action to follow. There is a piece of research history that matters here. In 1981, Doctor Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize for work involving the two hemispheres of the brain and how they process information. That research did not prove a spiritual claim. It helped establish that different parts of the brain contribute differently, while effective functioning depends on coordinated activity across the whole system. That distinction became important to a team led by neurologist Doctor Daniel Barone in New York. According to the materials behind the program I am about to describe, their focus was not another meditation track and not another product promising a mood shift. Their claim is that the target is whole brain coordination, using what they call neural sync technology in a short auditory sequence. Before I tell you the name, hear what people described. A woman from California said she had spent years trying to push through mental fog and emotional distance. She prayed, she journaled, she kept forcing herself into clarity. According to her account, after using the program consistently, she felt as if something blocked became easier to access again. A man from Texas described a different version of the same struggle. He carried responsibility for work and family while feeling mentally scattered. Decisions took too long. Focus disappeared quickly. According to his account, after using the program, he felt clearer and more capable of staying with one thought long enough to act. These are personal reports, not guarantees. The program is called the Genius Switch. It is presented as an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence developed by Dr. Barone and his team. The routine is simple. You use headphones. You close your eyes. You listen for 8 minutes a day. The Genius Switch is not positioned as a replacement for prayer, wisdom, sleep, medical care, or responsible decision-making. It is also not positioned as a generic brainwave track. The product materials describe it as a whole brain activation tool designed around hemisphere synchronization. The claim belongs to the program. Your discernment still belongs to you. This is where identity matters. The Genius Switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one, who has recognized that fog should not become a permanent identity. It is for the person who knows sincerity matters, but sincerity alone does not always make a crowded mind clear. A tool can support clarity. It cannot choose obedience for you. The listed price is $49. On the current offer described in the materials, it is $39. It also includes 4 bonuses and lifetime access. Those bonuses include a guided visualization, a smart grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a 5 habits infographic. The purchase is also described as covered by a money-back guarantee. Read the terms on the official page yourself before deciding. Do not treat any marketing promise as a substitute for your own judgment. There is one more reason to use the official source. The product materials warn that tracks using similar names may appear elsewhere without the same underlying method. So if you want to examine what Dr. Barone and his team are actually offering, use the link in the description or the pinned comment and read their page carefully. The tool does not replace God. The tool does not replace discernment. It does not surrender for you. It does not set the boundary. It does not take the first step. What it may offer is support for a clearer receiver. And if the receiver becomes clearer, the next faithful action has less noise to fight through. Chosen one, now we return to the part no tool can do for you. Your next move must become physical, not dramatic, not reckless. Physical means observable. Something in the real world must change because the clarity you received became a decision. This is where the first move principle becomes practical. Choose one action, not 10. One action that can be completed. One action that reduces confusion. One action that proves to your own nervous system that movement has already started. Write the decision down. Write the first move beneath it. Then write the thing you must stop feeding if you want that move to survive. Maybe it is an old conversation. Maybe it is a habit of checking for approval. Maybe it is the endless research that keeps reopening what is already clear. Then give the first move a deadline. Not someday, not when you feel fearless. Choose a real window. If the step is safe and responsible, make it happen within the next few days. Send the application. Schedule the meeting. Build the budget. Make the call. Create the boundary. Protect the hour. But hear this carefully. If you cannot leave yet, movement can still begin. Preparation is movement. Saving money is movement. Updating your resume is movement. Seeking legal advice is movement. Getting professional support is movement. Creating a safe exit plan is movement. Wisdom is not delay when it is producing readiness. Do not let an urgent message push you into an unsafe decision. A responsible next step should increase clarity, not destroy stability that must be protected. If the situation involves health, money, housing, or safety, use qualified help and real facts. Faith does not require carelessness. Now, picture the new room, not necessarily a new house. Picture a life where the same question no longer consumes your attention. You wake up and know what matters first. Your boundaries are clearer. Your conversations are cleaner. You notice opportunities because your mind is not spending every hour fighting an old decision. You did not become a different person overnight. You stopped forcing the next version of you to live inside the architecture of the old one. That is what movement can feel like. Less drama. More alignment between what you say matters and what your calendar proves matters. And if the resource described earlier matches a need you independently recognize, the link is still in the description and the pinned comment. You can review it there, read the details, consider the guarantee. Make your own decision. Do not buy because you think God requires it. Then return to the deeper work. Ask what you know. Ask what wisdom confirms. Ask what the next responsible action is. Then stop bargaining with the answer. Because clarity becomes powerful when it enters your hands. A boundary spoken, a form submitted, a box packed, a meeting scheduled, a habit interrupted. A small action can become evidence that the old season no longer owns every vote in your life. The next step does not have to impress anyone. It only has to be true. Chosen one. Before this message closes, do not rush away from the threshold. Give yourself one quiet moment. Let the noise settle. You only need enough stillness to notice what is already clear. Close your eyes if it is safe to do so. Let your shoulders lower. Take one slow breath. Picture yourself standing in a doorway. Behind you is the old room. It contains memories, roles, fears, habits, and versions of you that once had a purpose. Do not hate that room. It may have protected you. It may have taught you. It may have carried you through years you did not know how to survive any other way. But gratitude does not require permanent residence. You can honor what helped you and still admit that it cannot hold your future. Now look at what you are carrying toward the doorway. Maybe it is the need for approval. Maybe it is the repeated question you have already answered. Maybe it is fear of becoming unfamiliar to yourself. Set one thing down in your mind. Not your responsibilities, not wisdom, not love. Set down the agreement that says you must remain the old version of yourself just because that version is familiar. Feel your feet where they are. Notice your breathing. Place a hand over your heart if that feels natural, and say this quietly. I do not need the whole map to take the next faithful step. God, give me wisdom where I am uncertain. Give me restraint where I am impulsive. Give me courage where fear has disguised itself as patience. Protect me from reckless decisions and protect me from endless delay. Help me recognize the difference between peace and familiarity. Help me test what I feel with wisdom, truth, responsibility, and patience. And when the next faithful step becomes clear, help me stop reopening the question simply because movement feels uncomfortable. I release the belief that an old season must become evil before I am allowed to leave it. I release the need to carry every old role into every new room. I release the habit of calling fear discernment when fear is the only voice asking me to stay. I am no longer confusing familiarity with instruction. I receive clarity. I test it with wisdom. And when the next faithful step is clear, I move. If that is your decision today, write "I will move" in the comments, not as a magical contract. Let it be a marker that clarity must eventually become action. You do not have to see the whole road. You do not have to know every turn. You do not have to become fearless before you begin. You only have to stop pretending you cannot see the next step, when that step has already become clear. The old season can be honored without being repeated. The old room can be blessed without becoming your prison. The person you had to be can be thanked without becoming the person you must remain. Chosen one, carry wisdom, carry responsibility, carry what is true, pack only what can cross. And when the next faithful step is clear, move.